It's not just a win for one nation or Pauline
The
Hanson.
year is 2028. Pauline Hanson just won the election. She has a vision for this country.
I have a vision for this country.
And she's had 30 years to prepare for this exact moment. What is going to happen to Australia? To work this out, I had to dig through secret leaked documents, 3-year-long undercover investigations.
We have the testicles of the government in our hand at every given stage.
And have found 5 key policies Pauline would enact. Starting with migration, of course, it's migration. Pauline's first job would be deporting 75,000 people. In Victorian terms, that's 3/4 of the MCG. That's every single illegal immigrant. So it would undoubtedly require an ICE-style mass deportation. But we're not the US. We don't exactly have people hopping the border. It's mainly people who have overstayed their visas, so it's a floating number that tends to resolve itself. But the details don't really matter here anyway, because Pauline is going to give them no recourse to appeal. All of the illegal immigrants are now out. What's next? Pauline wants to refuse entry to migrants from nations known to have extremist ideologies. This has been criticised as one nation's version of the Trump Muslim ban, especially given Pauline's no good Muslims comments, wearing a burqa in the Senate twice, and being found guilty of racial discrimination for telling another senator to piss off back to Pakistan. Despite the obvious issues with this ban, I wonder how our neighbour, the largest Muslim majority country in the world, would feel about it. How many migrants would Pauline actually accept going forward? Here's where a lot of politicians like Pauline trip people up, because there's a lot of similar sounding numbers that get thrown around. To start with, we have net overseas migration, the big headline figure that you always hear about. This recent spike was largely caused by the post-COVID visa backlog, and it's now down 40% to around 300k. This is a number that even One Nation MP David Farley agrees with.
Is 306,000 too many? No, it's probably not.
But this isn't the full migration picture. This includes Aussies returning home, students, temporary visa holders, Kiwis. The number that really matters is here: permanent visas issued. This isn't just us waving people in. Most of the permanent visas are temporary visas that turn permanent. In this list are around 130k skilled workers, the people that Australia desperately needs: engineers, nurses, tradies, and 50k of those are family visas. You can't get rid of these without hurting the skills visas. Separately, there's the humanitarian program, which Pauline also wants to cut, around 20,000 people. So what would actually happen under Pauline's plan? She says she wants to get net overseas migration to negative 100k. The housing crisis we have would get worse due to construction worker shortages. Our 4th biggest export category, education, would be hit hard, and ironically, the most vulnerable places are going to be One Nation territory, country Australia. Half of Australia's doctors were born overseas, but in rural areas, this number is even higher. Let's not forget, we tried this experiment in COVID. We shut down the country entirely, and fruit rotted in the fields. Farmers couldn't get workers. Yes, there are problems with the migration system. We've all met an Uber driver with 2 PhDs that can't find a job, but the government is fixing it. We've made huge progress in this area. I wrote a whole article here if you want to learn more. But don't just take my word for it. I think this was best summed up by our Home Affairs Minister,
These are the
Tony
areas
Burke.
where people want to cut. Then they need to explain which hospitals they're going to say don't have to fill every shift, which education providers won't be teaching the full range of subjects anymore, which construction projects they are willing to wait longer for, including housing projects, if we're not going to have the labour we need to get them built. But to have the argument about total numbers without saying where you want to cut is spin without any substance at all.
Look, I can yap all day about numbers, but the truth is, shit is expensive. People just want house prices to go down. So would this actually help? Well, the Grattan Institute modelled Peter Dutton's plan, which is more moderate than Pauline's but stricter than Labor's, and found that it only put a 2.5% downward pressure on rents after a decade, and it would hurt the economy and blow out government debt in the process. But those are Dutton's numbers. How about Pauline's? The closest thing to Pauline's numbers was done by this guy, KPMG's chief economist. He modelled zero migration and found that it would result in higher house prices, actually 2.3% higher than they would be under Labor's migration plan. And it would also mean a smaller economy and $500 billion more debt. So why would Pauline advocate for a policy that would screw over her electorate, crash the agriculture industry, gut our 4th largest export, exacerbate existing doctor shortages, all to make housing more expensive and kill the economy? Well, that's because it's not serious policy. It's a campaign strategy popular across the world right now due to far-right populist movements. Drumming up fear about immigration works. It wins votes. But is it worth it? Turning Australians against each other for a policy that doesn't even work?
We want to slash about approximately $19 billion from government waste and spending. Any questions? Right. No one has a question.
Cutting government spending is a popular election promise on all sides of politics. No one likes inefficiency and we all want to save money. This is one of Pauline's flagship policies, $90 billion in savings. So I expected to see something pretty well thought out. I mean, it's a $90 billion policy. It was 367 words.
What's this, motherfucker?
So what would One Nation cut to get to $90 billion in savings? First, the Department of Climate Change. This is the only time Pauline will have a real number. There is $30 billion spent here. However, that conveniently ignores this $26 billion under special accounts. That's the CEFC. Basically, they're a bank who hands out free checks to companies who want to run new initiatives to cut emissions. Except not really, they take that shit back. The CEFC is basically just a bank with good interest rate loans to encourage green investments where they would otherwise not be super profitable. It makes us money. Things like the safeguard mechanism and vehicle efficiency standard schemes don't cost us much at all to run. Unless she wants to touch future made in Australia. The government's plan to turn us into a high-skilled manufacturing powerhouse, processing critical minerals onshore rather than just shipping them off raw. She's not going to be able to find much savings here. Although she does have a mixed record on supporting Australian industry. Let's just be generous and use the Institute of Public Affairs numbers, the climate denial think tank funded by Gina Reinhart. Even they put it at $9 billion. So to be fair, I'll give her all of that. And in that same budget, we'll lose $13 billion to climate disasters. The next one has been topical recently, thanks to our own Timu Nick Shirley, which, geez, that's a low bar. Cuts to the NDIS. To be fair, there's also been a parliamentary inquiry which has put the cost overruns of the NDIS right in the spotlight. Pauline wants to return the NDIS to its original purpose, but work is already underway to cut the NDIS. These cuts are projected to save $22 billion. And to her credit, Hanson has supported Labor's cuts before. Maybe she does want to see the NDIS thrive and be a great system. Maybe Pauline really does care about people with disabilities. Except she wants to remove disability requirements for new homes. Okay, fine, let's say Pauline is able to get in there, go line by line, crack down on all the fraud and get every dollar back. Well, the parliamentary inquiry put this at $3.7 billion in savings. And that's just not pure fraud, but also broader misuse and non-compliance. So we'll be generous and say Pauline gets the job done. $3.7 billion added to the tally. We still have a lot of ground to cover, so it's time for a rapid fire. She wants to withdraw us from the UN and the World Health Organization. She wants to cut cultural funding and multicultural grants. We'll be generous and round this all up. She wants to review PBS medications, which is terrifying. If you take any sort of medication, you know how insane these PBS discounts can be. She also wants to abolish the Therapeutic Goods Administration, which doesn't cost us much at all given it's 90% paid for by big pharma membership fees. I was going to shit on Pauline for proposing a plan to move people from one building to another until I went on the TGA website and they're already part of the Department of Health. I don't even know what happened with this one. The next one is reduce and redirect foreign aid. Now, most of our foreign aid goes to the Pacific. These aren't just our neighbours. This is an important relationship. Not just strategically, but honestly, I think this is something we should be proud of. In the 2024 DFAT summary, it said, Australians see the Pacific as family. And at a time when even Peter Dutton recognises the imminent climate crisis, you don't turn your back on family. Also, David Farley supports this one too. To her credit, Pauline doesn't just say we should cut all foreign aid. She does say, redirect. The next one is the most cooked by far. First Nations cuts. Despite being Indigenous herself,
I'm Indigenous. I was born here. I'm native to the land.
She's Indigenous?
Yes, I am.
Pauline wants to make $12.5 billion worth of cuts and abolish the NIAA. But this number is pulled out of thin air. Pauline said a few different numbers over the years.
Then we've got the Aboriginal industry, another $30 billion a year. That's going into it. What have we got? Sexual abuse, domestic violence, alcoholism that's going on. No jobs, no productivity, absolutely nothing.
The real government spending on Indigenous-specific programs is $5.3 billion, less than 1% of the budget. Pauline likely got this number from a debunked source, because to actually reach these numbers, you're including Aboriginal people's per capita share of regular government funding, including Centrelink, hospitals, and defence. Yes, we're allocating 4% of these submarines to Indigenous people. But let's just stop and think here. Despite all of this funding, we're still way behind on many of the closing the gap metrics. This really is one of our most vulnerable groups in society, and arguably need a lot more funding. Pauline's been on this talk track for decades. It's what kicked off her political career in the first place and got her disendorsed by John Howard. From the rapid fire round, we have $5 billion in cuts. Plus, let's say she does cut all First Nations specific spending, that's another $5.3 billion. We still have a huge gap.
Son of a bitch.
When I first put this video together, Pauline's gas policy was to build a domestic reserve, but Labor's already announced that. so she's since gone on stage to announce she would implement an export tax. But this has been covered to death. Anyway, I don't know how she can call this a budget cut. This is like selling your couch and saying that you've saved money. Will be nice and add it as a budget cut, because even with all of this, we still have a Lebanon-sized gap of trust me bro. So what cuts would actually happen if Pauline was elected? Well, the bad news is she's essentially copying from the Trump and Elon playbook. But the good news is this gives us a great indication as to how things might go here. Musk started very similar to Pauline, promising ridiculous savings.
We can do at least $2 trillion.
Months later, he scaled back that projection.
Our goal is to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion.
Months later again, they claim to have only saved $175 billion. In the end, DOGE was estimated to have cost the government $20 to $130 billion, with the IRS projecting over $500 billion in revenue loss due to DOGE cuts. And that's before even mentioning the nearly 1 million deaths caused by the cuts to USAID. And this is America, with a program run by the richest guy in the world. Ours will be run by Pauline Hanson and Gina Reinhart. And much like Musk, this would probably end in the most vulnerable people being harmed. Government budget cuts are a bit of a myth anyway. They're a sugar hit policy that sounds good ahead of elections. Most of the time, the real cuts come from expanding the public service and cutting expensive consultants. To really cover the gap and get to $90 billion, you'd have to cut essential services that Australians rely on. But that doesn't sell well as an election pitch. So far, we've been focused on Pauline, but we cannot forget the nightmare blunt rotation that is the rest of One Nation.
Vampire. Nationalist. A scared man.
Really?
Retard. Traitor.
Despite allegations that she runs the party like a dictator, with her chief of staff exerting control by keeping dirt files on people as a way of intimidating and silencing them, there are other people in the party too. There's one guy who's been around for a long time, Malcolm Roberts. This guy was elected with the lowest number of first preference votes in federal history, 77. A quick YouTube search shows that he is a level 100 climate change cooker. He's most famous for this interaction with Brian Cox.
A fantastic scientist who believes in empirical evidence.
The graph, right? I mean, can you
Saying two things. First of all, that the data has been corrupted, and we know that the 1930s were warmer than today.
Yeah. Corrupted? What do you mean corrupted?
Been manipulated and
By who?
By NASA. By the yes. As far as I'm concerned, politics should be based on empirical evidence. Hang on.
The evidence.
So yeah, if Pauline wins, our climate change policy might be written by a cooker. But that's just one cooker in the party, right?
Bottom-dwelling, mud-sucking creatures. I don't want the government anymore in my life. I'm sick of the government being in my life.
The former Deputy Prime Minister lying on his back on a busy Canberra street.
No! What's the member for Shortland do? Phil Shorten is definitely going to win, and you can trust me.
You're a flash bit of kit in this chamber, there's no doubt about you.
Sure, there's a standing order somewhere, Senator.
Please, get rid of your climate change department. Look at this. It's a drought. I want my money back. Didn't work.
There'll be no climate change department. There'll be no climate change policy.
With Barnaby in the party, the exodia of climate change cookers is complete, and One Nation are ready to take us into the Wall-E future. So what would be their policies? First, they want to abolish net zero. They go on about this constantly. They call it a vehicle for creating a socialist Australia in which citizens are forced under government control. But again, it's a myth that net zero costs us money. It's actually a huge economic opportunity, projected to grow our economy by $85 billion. $85 billion. That's pretty much the $90 billion in cuts that we just covered. Treasury projections say that a disorderly approach, which is definitely what we would have with these blokes in charge, would have adverse consequences costing us up to $2 trillion. We stand to make lots of money out of this. The EU, our third biggest trading partner that we just signed a free trade deal with, cares about this shit. And if we cut net zero, we'd essentially have to pay a tariff to the EU as a result. Not to mention all the countries that would be pissed off at us damn near denouncing us. Bro, $2 trillion! I swear. If One Nation get in and fuck up the future economy for us, I swear to God. And not to mention, we'd be handing over the strategic Pacific relationship straight to China. These guys care about climate too. One Nation would also abolish the Department of Climate Change, who are key for modelling and prevention for climate-related natural disasters, which cost us billions. To be honest, there's a case to be made that we're underspending here. We should be spending a lot more on prevention rather than response. So what would these guys do instead? Nuclear, the $700 billion policy that cost Dutton the election. and more coal.
We strongly support building new coal-fired power stations.
I had high hopes for Pauline's education policy. After all, Conservatives have a vested interest in education policy. The lower the education, the higher the votes.
I'm going to close the Department of Education.
So I was disappointed to see that this was it. Restore critical thinking in the classroom and reinstate the cornerstone of education with reading, writing, arithmetic, and discipline. Okay, this is getting repetitive. You open a policy, it's super light with no detail, rinse and repeat. So let's do a speed run. One Nation wants a COVID Royal Commission, bringing the anti-vax slop into 2026. They're also pro-life, which has been getting them a lot of negative press recently. She's pro-Israel. Like I mentioned earlier, she wants to remove us from the UN and withdraw us from the WHO. How original. She wants to give us constitutional freedom of speech. Yes, the woman who sued a musician for doing a parody of her wants constitutional free speech. She has a family tax policy where couples with kids can split their income tax, which sounds fine until you realise a doctor with a stay-at-home partner can save 15k, but 2 working nurses could save 0. She wants to remove the beer tax. She's weirdly pro-medical cannabis. She wants to increase defence spending with some rumours of conscription. One of her most fleshed out policies is fishing.
This is for the girls, this one. This is something the greenies don't want us doing.
But digging through it, she pretty much wants to remove environmental conservation laws, industrial relations laws, and open the Great Barrier Reef for fishing. For her housing policy, she wants to remove GST on construction materials, which sounds fine until you realise it's just handing money to construction companies with no guarantee that they'll pass it on. She wants to abolish the ABC.
I would pull their funding, but I'd only fund the ABC radio in rural and regional areas, but these other wankers out there, as far as I'm concerned, they're not worth the money that they're getting paid.
And abolish the SBS. She wants to get rid of compulsory preferential voting, which is probably the best feature of this country. She wants to introduce biological sex laws and increase the voting age to 21. But look, most of this is just talk. It's hard to trust her promises when she's voted in the total opposite direction. She has a housing affordability policy but votes against it, policies in support of families but votes against them. It's hard to know with Pauline exactly where she stands. But sometimes, you get exactly what you expect. When I was doing research for this video, it just felt like things weren't quite adding up. Between the huge donations, suspicious fundraisers, and massive spike in support, it feels like something is off. Most suspicious of all is her sudden rise in support timed perfectly after her trip to Mar-a-Lago. It just feels like this isn't all grassroots, like there must be something bigger beneath the surface. Al Jazeera sent a man undercover into the NRA for 3 years, and what he found may be the closest we'll ever get to seeing how this machine works behind the scenes.
The nation said it was prepared to soften strict gun control legislation in Australia.
We want to get funding. That is really the nuts and bolts because we can change everything in this country. If they threw $10 million at us, we could fucking win a heap of seats, plus loads of seats in the Senate, mate. You make this shit happen, mate. I'll make sure we open any door you need open.
If One Nation could get $10 million, you'd pick up 8 Senate seats.
That guarantees you balance of power. I mean, that
out of
how many? The whole government by the balls.
For 10 million, you'd have the government by the balls. This was 7 years ago. Since then, this machine has grown in sophistication. Trump is now president for the second time. Musk has bought Twitter and turned it into a right-wing bot farm, and the worst people ever are running the United States. And Gina and Pauline's connection to it all has grown deeper and deeper. Imagine you are Gina Reinhart. You want your interests represented in Parliament. What are your interests?
What's mine is mine. What's yours is also mine.
Politics isn't pure pay to win, otherwise Clive Palmer would be in charge. To really have influence, you need to plug into a machine. That's exactly what Gina did. She's donated millions to the Institute of Public Affairs, a right-wing think tank, at one point making up half of their income for the year. The IPA is a part of the Atlas Network, a group of over 500 think tanks with the explicit goal of influencing the public and government agendas through research, media interviews, drafting policies, and large-scale campaigns. And the IPA does a lot of research. One of their key topics is climate change, such as the work from this bloke, a guy who recently donated $500,000 to One Nation. Then comes the media layer.
New polling from the Institute of Public Affairs.
New report today from the Institute of Public Affairs.
Institute of Public Affairs. These platforms give conservative think tanks uncritical exposure. The IPA has had its members appear on Sky News over 1,000 times. Viewers hear them as experts, not lobbyists.
affordable and they want reliable energy. And the way we get there is by investing in 24/7 baseload power, such as coal and gas.
This might sound crazy, but it works. Don't believe me? Look at this graph. This is The Voice, a cause which had over 65% support before the machine chose it as a target campaign. This time it wasn't the IPA, it was another lobby group funded by Gina Rinehart, Advance. This is when Advance started their campaign, and they proudly take credit for flipping this from a 65% yes into a 60% no through an extensive multi-million-dollar on-the-ground and social media campaign, including dodgy tactics like allegedly running a Facebook group called Referendum News but pushing only vote no content, and allegedly misrepresenting First Nations people in video clips and ads without their permission. This machine worked, and thanks to Gina and other donors just like her, The Voice lost. The will of the people was changed, I'd argue, undemocratically. And we only know about Gina's involvement through subpoenas and investigative journalists. Remember, that NRA sting took 3 years of being deep undercover. Imagine what we don't know. Imagine what we'll never see. All of this explains why the policies are so light. Most of them aren't serious policies. They're reasons to vote for one nation. You have the vote winners, immigration, a tried and true wedge issue that keeps the money flowing into the party, keeps the base angry and motivated. And you've got budget cuts, campaign on ridiculous numbers you could never seriously hit, and if you do win, cut the regulations and taxes of your billionaire backers. In the case of Pauline, this means cutting the Department of Climate Change. The policies are so light because the only one that really matters is climate policy.
Does she give policy advice?
She puts forward some policies like everyone else. I have the gas industry here today as well. Why wouldn't I listen to Gina Rinehart?
Now, am I saying Gina's been pulling the strings this whole time? No. This machine has already been successful without her, taking climate from our top issue as a country to not even in the top 5. Gina just likely saw the anti-immigration winds of change and decided to latch on to the OG of anti-immigration. Now, I'm not the first to point this out.
Pauline Hanson's a wholly owned subsidiary of Gina Rinehart. We know this because whenever Pauline Hanson is asked to vote in the interests of Australian workers, she instead votes in the interests of Gina Rinehart.
I think he was close, but a bit off the mark.
No one changes my vision, what I have for Australia.
Pauline isn't owned by Gina. They've just made a deal. Pauline needs to be plugged into this machine, flown out to the US to meet Trump and the forces that got him into power, and to be signal boosted by the media ecosystem that worked for him.
This is not your average cruise ship. It's exclusively for multi-millionaires. Pauline Hanson and Barnaby Joyce attended an event with Gina Rinehart. That's where Rinehart auctioned off a Mar-a-Lago dinner with US President Donald Trump and bejeweled Trump bags to fundraise $300,000 for One Nation.
For 30 years, Pauline has been seen as a joke, the leader of a fringe minor party. But things have changed. Now there is an infrastructure to bring these parties into power. First, you have the think tank layer, a web of well-funded global research institutes to work out what conservative policies poll well. You can even hone in on fringe issues to manufacture outrage. Then these ideas are platformed by friendly media outlets, normalising them through lobbyists disguised as experts. Next, you have the pundit layer, social media channels often foreign-backed and amplified by bots who spread the message far and wide. The astroturfing helps normalise the ideas, and the influencers bring those ideas firmly into the zeitgeist. Then all you have to do is pump the message over and over again, do whatever it takes to win, and once you're in, give your backers a return on their investment. This machine is working all around the world. It worked here in 2019, when Clive Palmer spent millions on ads to funnel votes to the Liberals, directed by Trump's campaign manager Steve Bannon. As revealed in the Epstein files, it worked again with The Voice, the first real test run of this machine in full force in Australia. With all the pieces in place, the machine just needed to find an orange anti-immigration populist, once dismissed as a joke, comfortable using public office for personal enrichment, to cut a deal with. The deal is, Pauline gets to run her dictatorship, gets filthy rich, gets to fly around in a private jet, gets international legitimacy, a stage at CPAC, a footnote in the global culture war, and a serious shot at Prime Minister. And in exchange, Gina gets whatever she wants.